Hello everyone, welcome to the 7th Brazilian Congress of International Tax Law, promoted by the Brazilian Institute of Tax Law. The IBDT is a non-profit association founded in 1974 by Professor Rui Barbosa Nogueira with the purpose of developing tax law in Brazil. Today, IBDT is a reference in international tax law, offering both a specialization and master's degree on international tax law. This year's Congress has three main subjects: risks and new technologies, impacts of the US tax reform on OECD and developing countries, and finally, recently developments in international tax law. In order to provide an in-depth analysis of these subjects, each panel is structured as follows. A foreign professor introduced the main issues related to each subject, and afterwards, other speakers, Brazilians and foreigners, will provide some commentaries and share his country's experience on the subject. We hope you enjoy.
Ok, senhoras e senhores, já estamos recomeçando. Teremos agora a segunda sessão, Economia de Compartilhamento, Experiências Locais. Já estamos na mesa com os integrantes, o Dr. Edson Carlos Fernandes, presidente desta sessão. Ele é doutor pela PUC de São Paulo, professor de Direito Tributário na Fundação Getúlio Vargas e professor do IBDT. Temos também a doutora Jennifer Roeleveld, professora de Direito Tributário na Universidade da Cidade do Cabo, na África do Sul. Dr. Roberto Quiroga Mosqueira, professor de Direito Tributário da Universidade de São Paulo. Dr. Vikram Chand, professor de Direito Tributário da Universidade de Lausanne. Também o Dr. Brista Atal, Universidade Central de Finanças da China, onde é professor de Direito Tributário. Dr. Victor Machekin, professor também de Direito Tributário da Academia de Direito de Kutafen, em Moscou. E o Dr. Daniel Gutmann, professor de Direito Tributário da Universidade de Sorbonne, em Paris. Então vamos recebê-los também com o aplauso de todos para iniciarmos esta segunda sessão. Com a palavra, Dr. Edson Carlos Fernandes. Obrigado.
Muito bom dia a todos. Quero parabenizar e agradecer o professor Ricardo Maris de Oliveira, o professor Chueri, por esse evento, casa cheia, e pelo convite que me foi feito nessa segunda parte de debate sobre economia digital. Isso me lembrou que na segunda metade dos anos 1990, Nicolas Negroponte, autor de Vida Digital, ele conta que foi passar pela alfândega e declarar o seu computador, o seu notebook. E a moça da alfândega perguntou quanto valia. Ele falou 10 milhões de dólares. Ela falou, de jeito nenhum, com 2 mil dólares eu compro esse computador. Ele falou, com 2 mil dólares a senhora compra o computador. A informação que tem aqui dentro vale 10 milhões de dólares. E é esse ambiente que nós estamos vivendo quando nós vamos falar, então, de economia digital, de economia compartilhada. E como tributar os 10 milhões de dólares e não os 2 mil dólares. Eu passo, então, já a palavra para a professora Jennifer, que vai trazer a experiência da África do Sul.
Good morning. It's great that I can be here, so I will try and go a bit slowly so that you can understand. What I'm going to do is, we know now the background of the sharing economy, we know all the difficulties, and I think we can agree across many countries that we all agree we have the same kind of problems. So what I want to do is that okay, all right. I just want to use as a proxy the Airbnb and the Uber, but please see that just as a proxy for the sharing industry, because I thought it might make it a little bit easier just to see how we've dealt with it in South Africa or not dealt with it. So I'm not going to give you any detail behind that. We all know how that works. Also, just keep in mind that there is some correlation, as Yaref mentioned earlier, with the digital services and the digital side of the sharing economy. Now, in the first instance, we have, sorry, just put this on. Just to put it in a context, we have the collaborative platform, and sometimes it could be referred to as the broker, who's in between. We then have the service providers, which have the assets, they have time, if it's Uber, for example, or their skill that's going to be transferred. And then thirdly, the recipients, who are the users, the people who consume all these services. Now, in South Africa, in regard to the value-added tax, I would say we've actually progressed further in this domain than we have in the income tax space. I don't know if that's because it's easier, but it certainly has moved ahead. Now, we've partly solved some of the VAT problems, and I'll get to that a bit later, but what they have done is they've included platforms as intermediaries on the list of digital services. So the intermediary for a platform is now listed as one of the digital services, sort of giving an example of what a digital service could be, which means now they would have to, in certain circumstances, register for value-added tax. Now, regarding the income tax, this affects to a large extent, and I'm sure it's the same in Brazil, is the informal sector. This is very difficult to control. Compliance is a problem, and what we have to say is that shouldn't be the reasons of how we tax it. I think we've heard that already. We should have a policy about how we should tax that, as opposed to let's make it easier for ourselves and let's just tax X, because I think that upsets the whole system of neutrality and equality. So, if we take the first example of Uber, Taxify, or whatever you might use in your country, we have the platform, the Uber, we have the driver, and then we have the recipient, basic structure. As yet, we do not have Uber setting up any branch or any kind of platform in South Africa, as I think they have done in Australia. We don't have that. For the driver and the VAT consequences, in South Africa it's quite easy because it is an exempt supply. So in our VAT system, if there's transport by road or rail by fare-paying customers, it's an exempt supply. So it doesn't fall into the VAT system, because if you are only making exempt supplies, you may not register for VAT. Obviously, the downside of that is if you incur input VAT on your expenses, that becomes a cost. There's no way you can offset it. So that has made it quite easy, and that's why I think also South Africa hasn't needed to address this issue of a matter of urgency, because we've sort of solved it. Now, it's irrelevant if that industry, if it is an enterprise or becomes something much bigger, it still cannot register because it's making exempt supplies. The only time a problem would come in is if they are also making other taxable supplies at the same time, which are not exempt. And then you have the problem of apportionment. So I think at this point, the drivers in that might only be involved in this one sector and might have other employment. We haven't done a proper study of the type of persons involved. So that would be for the VAT story. Now, there's been an amendment, and this is what happens when you over-control, or you need to control, not from a tax aspect, but to control these things in your country, is the National Land Transport Amendment Bill now in 2018, and it is causing a bit of a problem, is that metered taxi licenses are now also given to hail ride, which is the Uber style, technology users. So they've included them, and they also now have to apply for the license. They may not operate without that license. Now the problem is, well, the first good thing is it puts it beyond doubt that ordinary taxi drivers and the Uber type of technology fall into the same net. Now, it means then the Uber drivers would also be making exempt supplies. So that solves that problem. Now, in Australia recently, there was a case where they looked at the differential between the different types of taxis, and they did rule that Uber was the same or similar to taxi drivers, and therefore were taxable, because Australia does not give an exemption like South Africa does, although our systems are very similar. Now, the problems as mentioned that have arisen is that there is an enormous backlog of trying to get a license for anything, actually, in South Africa at the moment. Gun licenses, what you name it, there is a problem. So it could take 18 months for you to actually obtain this license. The problem is the people in this industry need to work. They need to earn that income. And if they are caught, there's 100,000 rand, it's South African rands, fine and jail possibly for non-compliance. So this has become a huge difficulty for people already in this industry and now actually prevented from operating. So there's about 12,000 active Uber drivers in South Africa currently, and we all have maybe been subjected to where the ordinary taxi drivers resent the Uber industry and strike against them and block the cities and that type of thing. We've also had, they are targeted. So the bill is on the table, and they are asking for some kind of delay so that, or some kind of process that they can get their licenses quicker. I mean, they're not objecting to getting a license, but if it's so difficult, then this does cause a problem. Just let's look at the drivers of Uber, because I think this is where you do have problems depending how they set themselves up. Now, we're looking at income tax now, so the VAT's, as I said, not really a huge problem for us. Obviously, if a platform had to register, or a body, that would lead to certain other VAT consequences, but I think it would be catered for. Now, employees, if these Uber drivers were employees of Uber, or whoever their employer would be, then the employer would deduct pay as you earn. That's monthly deducting tax from their salaries, and they would be responsible, the employer as a third party, would be responsible for paying that over to the Revenue Authority. So that would be very nice, because they're doing the accounting. Problems that may arise. Is the employer then a PE? Does it have a PE presence in South Africa? Something which up till now has been quite difficult to pin down. I don't have an answer for that. Limited deductions for employees. So once you're in employment and you've got that employer-employee relationship, you cannot just deduct all kinds of expenses. You are limited to what you can deduct. So it might not be the greatest for a driver. Obviously, it's easier to control because monthly tax is deducted, and if it is below the thresholds, or if that's all that person earns, they don't have to submit tax returns. So that actually suits the system very nicely. I don't think they are classified as employees at this point. because there's been no debate around that, and it is a debatable question, but up till now, no, that is not what is happening. They're probably independent contractors, and if you're an independent contractor, you need to register as a taxpayer. Now, whether they are or not, I would suggest they're not registering, but they're supposed to. And because they're earning income, and they would be able to deduct expenses related to that kind of, to the earning of that income. And they would also have to become provisional taxpayers. So quite an onerous position to be in for the informal sector, where they want less administrative problems, not more. It's difficult to control, and the taxi industry itself in South Africa is one of the most difficult to control. And I think the revenue authorities have a problem going into certain areas to collect tax, because they might be shot or removed out of the system. So it is very difficult. However, it doesn't condone the fact that they're not registering. They should actually be. So I think those issues are not the issues that should change the tax legislation, but maybe there could be some easier way of administrating this, which is a different issue. Also, I see that they now, you may tip your Uber driver or Uber Eats as well, and that tip is also registered as income for them. They can opt in or opt out for that kind of situation. So it adds to the income, and in South Africa, if they're independent contractor, as we've suggested, then those tips would also form part of the income. They actually can't keep that out of the loop. If we look at Airbnb, if we see what kind of problems they have, in South Africa, 2.4 billion a year, South African rand, that's 166 million US dollars, is what is coming in revenue from these operations. Now, that is not just the B&B income, it's also the income that guests spend in your country while they're in the Airbnb. So it looks like they do have this information. So somehow this information is being collected. The average yearly income from a B&B host would be about 28,000 South African rands, that's 1,900 US dollars. So it's not really a lot of money. It's a seasonal thing sometimes because of the winter months. Maybe you don't want to go and stay in South Africa, but also it would be below the threshold before you have to register for tax. So I think at the moment, unless that there are operators, which I do know about, who have quite a few B&Bs in various areas, and maybe in the system, this has been calculated as separate, whereas if you combine them, they should be in the tax net and they should be registering. The VAT threshold at the moment is 1 million South African rand, and that is for you to be in the VAT system. And for commercial accommodation, now B&B Enterprises is a commercial rental establishment. Why I'm saying that is because if it's residential, where you would have your private home, or you're giving lets that might be for a considerable number of months, or let's say 1 year or 2 years, that is regarded as a residential accommodation, and once again, that is an exempt supply. So there could be confusion of when your residential property becomes more frequent and becomes a commercial proposition. These hosts are conducting an enterprise. Enterprise is the word used for the economic activity that is going on for you to register as for value-added tax. And taxable supplies that you are making must be for a consideration. If there's no consideration, then there's no way of measuring or bringing it into the VAT system. And I'm saying that because of the barter transaction, which confuses the issue. So goods and services are given, and to pay for a supply, that is possible to do. So if you give goods and services in return for what the stay that you are having, maybe you're given points or some other kind of value, that would have to be valued, because that would be the consideration. Not what you're giving, it's what you're getting in return. So, as was mentioned earlier, you've got the valuation problem coming in here, because the VAT would be on the value given. Now, even though you are under the threshold of 1 million, you may register for value-added tax if your supplies are greater than 120,000 a year. Now, the reason for that is it's not compulsory or mandatory, but you may voluntarily want to do that. Why would you want to do that? To claim your inputs, because it's only if you're making taxable supplies, even though they're exempt, well, these aren't exempt, it's commercial accommodation. You may have high input VAT that you're paying, and you would want to deduct that. You can only do that if you are in the VAT system. So you may wish to actually register. If we look at the income tax, now once again, and I'd like to echo what Yarev said earlier, is that it already fits into the normal tax system. We don't actually need special rules. But perhaps what we do need is education about what fits where. And in South Africa, you've earned income, and you have to declare that income. You are taxed on a net basis. It's not a gross basis, so you can deduct your expenses. If you are non-resident, and the source is South Africa, you would still be taxed in South Africa, because non-residents are taxed on a source basis. Also, in terms of Article 6 of most of South African treaties, which does follow the OECD model, is that rental from property may be taxed in the country where the property is situated. So it sort of puts beyond doubt that these operators are in the tax net already and should be taxpayers and paying their fair share. But it doesn't really always happen. Now, there's no withholdings tax in this situation. The only withholdings tax we have on property for non-residents would be on the sale of the property itself. There will be capital gains tax on the sale of the property, and there would be an advance withholdings, not a final tax in those circumstances. So if we look at the net taxation, there are expenses deductible, apportionment, because very often these Airbnbs operate from the same space where you have your private home. Now, I know a lot of people are doing that. They rent out a room or a part of their house, so they have to then apportion their expenses which relate to the personal, the private part of the house, and that which relates to the rental part. So you have to do some calculations there. The other thing is that assessed losses, let's just say you're making a loss, and very often these places might be making a loss initially when they've got startup costs. Sorry, I didn't change my slides. So we're on the last item there, is assessed losses. If you have losses from that particular trade, it's going to be ring-fenced. We have anti-avoidance measures regarding this kind of ad hoc trading, which is not your main business, and a suspect trade is rental of properties. And so if you're making a loss, it will be ring-fenced. You won't lose the loss, but it'll be carried forward to set off against future profits in respect of that particular property. Issues for South Africa. There's no specific guidance for B&B hosts. So if you want to find information on the Revenue Authority site, it's not there. And there is no particular exchange of information between the Airbnb and the tax authority. So Airbnb does not have a particular website in South Africa currently, as there is in other countries, which is quite helpful. So perhaps South Africa has to learn from this, because I believe on those sites they do indicate the processes they need to observe and whether they need to register for tax, under which circumstances. We don't have that kind of guidance currently, and I think we need to do something on that side. No withholdings tax by the platforms for B&Bs particularly at this point in time. And I know with the United States and in Spain, they have issued guidance of how hosts should be operating, and that could be useful for South Africa. The platforms, as I said earlier, could be conducting an enterprise in South Africa if supplies to residents exceed the 1 million threshold, which means that no special dispensation. They would have to register as normal VAT vendors and account for their VAT. Now, problem is that a change we made recently, and you will see this when we talk about the digital services later on, is that if it is a digital service and it is 50,000 South African rand or more in a 12-month period, they have to register in South Africa for VAT. Now, this is a little bit problematic, because what about the domestic local people in the same situation who are only registering if they make taxable supplies of 1 million, and then they register? But foreign suppliers have this requirement now to register if they're digital services. So firstly, we'd have to establish if this is digital services with the Airbnb or what they're offering or not. So there's some definitions that need to be cleared up. Also, the kind of guidance that I would expect is that for any Airbnb host, what about the acquisition of the property? Because there's capital gains tax in South Africa, and for the disposal in the future, you would need a base cost. So what is your base cost when you've hived off a piece of your private residence? And on disposal, if you've been operating a business, there has to be an apportionment, because part of that business has been already dealt with in the income tax system. Whether you've done that or not is irrelevant. It will be hived off from the capital gains tax sector, because for capital gains tax purposes, there's no expenses. There's only the base cost of the property and improvements, and then the disposal proceeds, whatever you get for that. So the apportionment there would be quite not complicated, but people need to be aware that they would have to do this. The other complication could be whether you own that property in your own name, whether you own it in a partnership, or whether, and there's quite a lot of trusts in South Africa, whether you own it via trust, and or you just operate in your own name. All of those vehicles have different tax consequences. Now, it is a bit sad that we have these problems and there's no guidance given by the revenue authorities into how to actually deal with it and go about it. Also, just to digress a little bit from the sharing of Airbnbs and Uber, is that free internet services has not been considered at all in South Africa. I think it's too horrible to contemplate, and I think we're waiting until some other country or the OECD sorts this out, and because we do tend to follow the OECD. I saw recently that Uganda, which is an African country, and Zambia are proposing a levy on data services. So when you're buying your data, they are imposing a levy because in those countries, because of the infrastructure that is so poor, much of the business is done electronically on cell phones, for example. And so they're thinking, well, let's get a share of income on this. And they're imposing that quite as we speak, but there has been quite an outcry from the users, obviously, of this, because that's not very nice for them. So paying for data bundles, you already pay for it, now you're going to have to pay more. I think that wouldn't go down well in South Africa either, because data is quite expensive. And there is the advertising revenue, which we always must remember, on which there is VAT and income tax in respect of these sharing activities. So just to say that is sort of the situation that South Africa is in. I think with the Uber situation, it's nicely settled because of the exemption, but that doesn't say that the legislation actually fully caters for all the players. I've just sort of given you an illustration of the drivers. The platforms are still a questionable issue, and you will see later when we talk about the digital services how some of that has been addressed. So we have been moving somewhat forward, although it is a little bit slow. So I think I will end there. Okay, thank you.
Muito obrigado. A gente já pôde perceber a prática do que foi dito no primeiro painel. Eu passo a palavra então agora para o professor Roberto Quiroga, aqui da USP, que vai dar a experiência brasileira.
Bem, bom dia a todos. Agradeço também o convite do IBDT por estar mais uma vez nesse congresso anual. E como sempre me atribuíram um tema que realmente eu precisei tentar entender em todas as suas circunstâncias, principalmente por ser uma novidade e, consequentemente, por tentar identificar casos efetivos ou aquilo que realmente hoje está sendo discutido no Brasil. Né? Eu começo basicamente tentando... Eu acho que o primeiro tema importante que se fala, e principalmente é uma grande mudança, a meu ver, no direito tributário brasileiro, nós estamos passando por uma transformação muito grande em termos de sofisticação e robustez daqueles temas que nós estamos analisando. O direito tributário hoje se tornou extremamente complexo, extremamente sofisticado. E talvez temas que antes nós tratávamos muito facilmente como decadências ou temas gerais, hoje eles praticamente estão deixando de existir. E nós estamos indo para uma necessidade de entender temas que são efetivamente muito mais complicados do que nós tínhamos. Como sócio de um escritório de advogado, eu vejo claramente que nós estamos tendo uma mudança na nossa profissão, na medida em que os temas mais genéricos, os temas mais comuns, é de conhecimento muito mais amplo e, na verdade, o grande valor agregado, a grande diferença que se faz é justamente quando temas que exigem um melhor conhecimento não só da norma, mas do fato, fazem com que você precise gastar mais tempo nessa análise individual do caso. O segundo tema também relacionado a isso é que o Brasil em termos de economia digital, talvez seja o segundo ou terceiro país no mundo que mais utiliza isso. Nós estamos muito acostumados com a economia digital. O Brasil é um país que gosta disso, né? Nos aplicativos que hoje nós temos aqui, talvez nós sejamos o segundo país de mais utilização. Nós somos utentes dessa tecnologia, gostamos dessa tecnologia e temos um mercado de 220 milhões de pessoas, né? E essa também é uma realidade fática importante quando você vai analisar questões como essa de economia digital. Então, acho que o primeiro ponto que eu coloco aqui, e acho que já foi discutido na parte da manhã, é essa dificuldade de delimitação do tema. Mas ele mostra a sua importância justamente, a meu ver, por esses dois motivos. A sofisticação e a complexidade que os temas de direito tributário no Brasil começam a ter, excluindo um grupo de temas muito genéricos que quase todos militam. E o segundo tema é justamente nesse aspecto digital, por nós estarmos muito enfronhados e muito acostumados com esse tipo de atividade, né? Segunda questão, com relação à chamada economia compartilhada, é tentar entender as suas espécies, né? E basicamente, eu encontrei ou identifiquei 4 tipos de denominadas economias compartilhadas que também devem ser analisadas com muito cuidado. Primeiro, é aquele tipo de economia compartilhada que, na verdade, diz respeito a uma plataforma digital, onde, basicamente, as relações são tripartites. Nós temos, então, a plataforma, nós temos, eventualmente, o consumidor e nós temos o fornecedor. E é uma relação de 3 pessoas, essa chamada plataforma digital e a mais comum que a gente identifica. O segundo tipo de economia compartilhada que a gente poderia dizer, e é importante depois para entender as questões tributárias, é quando eu tenho um peer de fornecedor e um peer de consumidor, e onde, na verdade, eu não tenho a plataforma e isso se dá de forma direta, portanto, de forma bilateral. O terceiro tipo de economia compartilhada, muito comum, mas pouco vista, é aquela que, na verdade, eu tenho apenas um suporte de avaliação e reputacional. Na verdade, eu vou buscar propriamente algo que eu não sei se é serviço, se é bem, se é um intangível. Eventualmente é uma relação bilateral, mas não é relacionada a bens e serviços, e sim mais uma questão de avaliação ou reputacional. Muito difícil da gente ter esse enquadramento perfeito, né? E, por fim, a quarta espécie de economia compartilhada, talvez mais comum que nós temos hoje, é a chamada economia de matching, né? Então, a plataforma digital, peer de fornecedor e consumidor, plataformas que dão suporte de avaliação e reputação e o chamado matching. Devem existir muitas outras e vão surgir muitas outras. Mas, basicamente, essas 4 espécies de economias compartilhadas fazem com que a gente analise a questão fiscal também de forma diferente. Obviamente, a primeira, eu vou ter relações com 3, a segunda, bilateral, a terceira, eventualmente um intangível que eu estou adquirindo, e, por fim, o match, onde, na verdade, tem um terceiro que simplesmente faz o match. Mas o que é isso do match e como ele realiza essa operação? Diferentemente da plataforma digital, onde ele é parte na operação, né? Portanto, a grande dificuldade dessas 4 eventuais espécies que eu simplesmente classifiquei para ter utilidade na nossa discussão é justamente entender a natureza da operação, né? Depois de saber dos tipos, depois de entender dessa sofisticação e dessa complexidade, o grande problema é entender o seguinte: o que eu estou fazendo? Qual a operação jurídica que eu realizei? Como que eu identifico e classifico essa operação que eu fiz, né? E, para essa função de identificar a natureza da operação, e eu vou falar um pouquinho mais à frente, nós não vamos fugir de uma clara noção e entendimento da relação contratual, sem a qual eu não vou conseguir efetivamente entender a operação, e justamente um segundo ponto, que é entender claramente os fatos que eu estou analisando. Mais do que um grande desafio da legislação propriamente dita, é entender essas relações contratuais, eventualmente nesses 4 tipos de economia compartilhada que eu disse, e também entender, né, como que isso se relaciona em termos de partes ou que estão efetivamente nesse tipo de contrato. E talvez esse último ponto que eu coloquei, que eu achei importante dizer, porque eu também passei por várias coisas novas e nós tivemos que estudar coisas novas que antes eram muito estranhas ou muito novidades, mas assim, também não fazer da economia compartilhada como se fosse algo absolutamente inovador, absolutamente que só surgiu no mundo nos últimos 10 anos ou nos últimos 20 anos, porque na verdade, ainda que seja uma realidade fática nova, nós temos os nossos institutos jurídicos que são, quando eu digo olds, que são velhos, mas que estão aí que nós vamos aplicar. Eu tive, claramente na minha vida profissional, uma grande experiência na área de mercado financeiro de capitais, que quando eu comecei a estudar, o grande problema não era entender o imposto de renda ou as normas jurídicas, era entender a operação. Se eu não entendia a operação, eu não conseguia dar o meu conhecimento jurídico, né? Claro que coisas mais tradicionais, como circulação de mercadoria, né, produção de produtos, tudo isso era uma coisa que nós já estávamos acostumados a ver, mas talvez essa matéria lá, 30 anos atrás, quando eu comecei a estudar, pouquíssimos gostavam disso, pouquíssimos estudavam o tema e não entendiam as operações. Outro exemplo que eu me recordo também foi na época das privatizações, quando tive que se estudar a parte de telecomunicações, né? Como que isso realizava, quais eram as partes, como eu fazia essa operação, ninguém entendia basicamente como era esse serviço de telecomunicações ou serviço de energia, por exemplo. E nós tivemos que entender profundamente as relações contratuais, os fatos, para depois tentar entender qual a norma tributária que se aplicava. Então, assim, a primeira grande identificação nesse tema que eu acho importante é justamente saber que hoje nós conseguimos identificar, lato sensu, 4 categorias, na minha visão, de economia compartilhada e que é absolutamente necessário esse conhecimento das relações contratuais para que a gente possa chegar à solução dos problemas. Vou pedir que passe mais uma. Bem, o tema é sobre justamente questões relacionadas às questões domésticas, né? E o que eu disse importante também, eu acho que como segundo tema, eu não coloquei na transparência, eu me esqueci, na verdade, que não é só a relação dos contratos, mas hoje tem muita importância a análise do fluxo de dinheiro. Eu diria o seguinte, para que a gente consiga tentar entender as implicações tributárias dessas 4 classificações que eu fiz, necessariamente eu tenho que realizar uma análise fática, uma análise contratual e uma análise do fluxo de dinheiro, né? Talvez essas 3 coisas vão me dar mais substrato para tentar entender qual a norma tributária aplicável, né? As razões são óbvias, né? Hoje, toda a questão de fluxo de dinheiro, de uma certa forma, está atrelada a entender a natureza jurídica da operação, as relações contratuais, que muitas vezes os utentes dessa economia compartilhada não conhecem. Exemplo, na chamada plataforma digital, quem é a plataforma, eu não sei qual a relação dele com a sua plataforma controladora no exterior, por exemplo. Eu me relaciono aqui com a plataforma brasileira, mas eu não sei qual é a relação que essa plataforma brasileira tem eventualmente com o seu dono que está no exterior. Ou é uma plataforma doméstica e, portanto, eu só conheço essa plataforma. Então, essas 3 relações, elas viabilizam o quê? Viabilizam que realmente eu tente conseguir, eu tente obter o maior número de indicadores para que eu possa analisar a questão tributária. Obviamente, a primeira questão que se coloca é justamente a jurisdição da tributação. E, basicamente, quando eu vou analisar uma questão doméstica, eu falo da chamada competência tributária ou dos chamados pseudos conflitos de competência. Todos nós que já lidamos com outros temas como montagem, etc., etc., o grande debate é saber para quem eu vou pagar. Isso não é novo, isso não é uma coisa absolutamente diferente quando eu vou analisar a economia digital, né? Porque vou ter que saber se é prestação de serviço, vou ter que saber se é uma venda de mercadoria, vou ter que saber, enfim, o que eu efetivamente estou consumindo ou é objeto do meu contrato. Então, esse tema de competência tributária ou jurisdição tributária, eu encontro em qualquer outra situação. Qual a dificuldade? É que se eu não entender a operação, o contrato, o fato e o fluxo de dinheiros, dificilmente eu vou solucionar o problema, né? Claro que também eu não me detive aqui, porque a ideia era falar mais de questões domésticas, mas nós temos também a questão da chamada jurisdição internacional, que é justamente esses casos em que eu tenho um relacionamento da plataforma digital lá fora. Exemplo claro, às vezes eu nem sei que quando eu estou pagando o meu cartão de crédito, se eu estou realizando uma operação doméstica ou eu estou, na verdade, fazendo uma operação de câmbio para pagar a plataforma lá fora. E às vezes, na verdade, eu estou pagando um imposto sobre câmbio, quando na verdade eu imaginava que eu estou pagando para um doméstico. Ou seja, eu posso ter essa questão de jurisdição fiscal justamente por desconhecer quem é o contratante, justamente desconhecer como o fluxo de dinheiro se faz. Isso é muito comum, né? Outro dia no meu escritório, nós fomos fazer todo o nosso arquivo para a nuvem, e aí nós descobrimos que, na verdade, tudo que nós fazíamos era, obviamente, com alguém que estava no exterior e não aqui, e os custos eram extremamente relevantes e talvez nós não estávamos totalmente aptos a ver quais eram as consequências tributárias de uma operação desse tipo. Por quê? Porque talvez nós não estávamos atentos às relações contratuais e ao fluxo de dinheiro, né? Segundo tema, que com certeza será um issue doméstico e a gente vê isso em tantos outros assuntos. Todos esses sistemas de economia compartilhada, até por questões de segurança, concentram o fluxo de dinheiro inicialmente para uma determinada parte e que depois se segrega para os eventuais participantes dessa operação. E não é incomum nós identificarmos vários temas tributários sendo discutidos na esfera administrativa e jurisdicional, a respeito de se eu tenho uma receita net ou eu tenho uma receita bruta, né? Questões relacionadas a se eu tenho que faturar tudo como PIS, COFINS numa única empresa ou eu tenho que só fazer pelo net. Para os mais antigos, a gente poderia dar um clássico exemplo que eram das construtoras, né, o que elas pagavam nas subempreitadas. Quantos anos nós discutimos isso com a prefeitura para dizer que não incidia ISS sobre o bruto e sim sobre o net? Precisou um contencioso absurdo para depois as legislações municipais entenderam que era a base de cálculo net e não a base de cálculo bruta. Então, nesses temas de economia compartilhada, com certeza nós vamos ter esse tipo de problema, mas nós já temos esse tipo de tema. Por quê? Porque às vezes a relação contratual, inclusive da plataforma digital, até por uma segurança de rigidez financeira, ela se coloca como se fosse a receptora quase total dos recursos e repassadora para os demais, porque ela quer uma segurança justamente do não inadimplemento das obrigações. E às vezes aquilo que se escreve no contrato não é necessariamente aquilo que se realiza na prática. Isso gera uma grande discussão, né? Um exemplo também atual, só para dizer que isso não acontece só na economia digital, nós temos hoje um grande contencioso, por exemplo, na área de corretores imobiliários, que se unem a imobiliárias, onde o Código Civil diz que o corretor é independente e atua de forma de parceria. Só que, na verdade, hoje, numa corretagem imobiliária, você paga uma imobiliária e dá um cheque para o corretor. Esse é um contencioso que está totalmente, hoje, já em termos administrativos e judiciais. Ainda que eu tenha uma relação contratual nessa espécie, o que se entende hoje, pelo menos dentro das autoridades federais, é que, na verdade, é uma receita toda de uma empresa, e que depois ela só repassa para o outro, né? E aqui nós vamos falar justamente do último item, o que as questões trabalhistas podem provocar também de consequências. Porque nós estamos no Brasil, nós não estamos em outro lugar. Eu tenho que falar de questões domésticas e não de outros lugares, né? E, justamente, nesse caso das questões trabalhistas e também implicações fiscais, eu esqueci também de colocar uma questão de consumerista. Então, o que eu quero dizer? Claro, nós vamos analisar a parte tributária. Mas, por exemplo, o exemplo do Uber só, que é uma coisa pública, nós sabemos que já existe uma discussão se são empregados ou não são empregados. Recentemente há uma decisão dizendo que eles não são empregados. Mas se eles forem considerados empregados dentro da nossa jurisprudência brasileira, muda toda a análise tributária, né? Isso vem acontecendo, por exemplo, nos casos dos corretores, onde se entende que eventualmente eles são empregados ou são prestadores de serviço e, portanto, toda a matriz tributária muda, né? A questão de consumerista, nós vamos ver um caso que eu trouxe agora, mais recente, que justamente se discutiu uma questão dos chamados vouchers, que são expirados ou não são utilizados, onde o Conselho Municipal de Tributos aqui no Brasil, aqui em São Paulo, entendeu que, na verdade, isso seria uma renda da plataforma, mas que eventualmente teria um problema de direito do consumidor, porque nesse caso foi discutido se isso é uma renda efetiva como serviço ou isso é uma multa compensatória, né? O que eu quero dizer? Vai depender muito também de outros ramos do direito no Brasil que poderão alterar justamente essa matriz tributária daquilo que eu imagino em termos de incidência de vários tributos, né? Eu trouxe 2 exemplos só para terminar, me faltam 2 minutos. Isso aqui é um ponto importantíssimo. Isso aqui é Brasil. Hoje, a maior discussão que nós temos em matéria federal, em termos de autos de infração, é o que é interesse comum. Nós temos um entendimento da Receita Federal que interesse comum é interesse econômico. Nós estamos verificando vários lançamentos tributários onde são colocados 30, 60, 80 solidários porque são acionistas, porque são administradores, sendo que o STJ, em princípio, já definiu que interesse comum é interesse jurídico e não interesse econômico. Gente, nada mais apropriado para se discutir isso numa economia compartilhada. Quem é responsável tributário? Todos que compartilharam eventualmente o que foi feito? Ou os que têm a plataforma e, na verdade, os comerciantes? Porque você vai falar, não, os consumeristas nós temos aqui uma difusão muito grande, é bem provável que a interpretação não seja do consumerista. Mas e as plataformas e os fornecedores? Se eu entender esse interesse comum como interesse econômico, que é o que vem ocorrendo, eu vou ter um grande problema de responsabilidade. E principalmente nas economias compartilhadas, em que eu não tenho uma pulverização de pessoas. É claro que a grande maioria é uma economia de massa, mas não necessariamente ela será de massa, ela pode ser de um grupo menor de pessoas. Esse é o tema maior que nós temos hoje, né? Coloquei mais um tema aqui, simplesmente para aguçar a ideia de vocês, né? Hoje nós temos um CPC 47 que diz o que é serviço, né? Quando que eu considero serviço? Imaginem que uma dessas plataformas que recebe todo o fluxo de dinheiro quebre e não pague para aqueles que tinham a sua relação. E todos já prestaram serviço, ainda que não tenham recebido pelo CPC, é receita e, portanto, tem que se tributar independentemente do recebimento, ainda que haja eventualmente um problema relacionado a uma falência ou uma eventual recuperação judicial de uma plataforma. E 2 exemplos. Peguei um hoje, estava lendo o jornal vindo para cá e vi do Waze Carpool. Foi criado no Waze, esta semana no Brasil, o chamado serviço de carona, onde você paga, você divide com dinheiro, você paga R$2, R$3 para ter uma carona. E olha o que diz a Folha, não é prestação de serviço, é carona. O que é isso, né? É prestação de serviço? Por exemplo, é um reembolso de despesas. Na verdade, quando eu dou carona, eu estou me reembolsando a despesa para pagar o meu custo da gasolina e da manutenção do meu veículo. Ou efetivamente é uma prestação de serviço? O percentual que a plataforma do Waze vai receber justamente por viabilizar a carona, acho que está claro o que é. Mas para os usuários, os utentes disso, o que é? É free rider? É carona? Base de cálculo zero? É serviço? É uma um reembolso de despesas. Foi lançado hoje, pelo menos eu vi hoje, parece que foi essa semana. É um tema que mostra a dificuldade, na verdade, de entender o processo. E, por fim, esse exemplo que eu dei do Group on Digital Services, que, na verdade, é muito comum hoje, tanto na área de alimentação como na área de ginástica, onde, na verdade, eu me comprometo a ir numa academia, eu tenho vouchers, mas se eu não usar a academia, esse dinheiro vai para quem? Vai para a plataforma, não vai para a academia. E em recente decisão do Conselho Municipal de Tributos, eles entenderam, se defendeu dizendo que era uma multa compensatória. Acho que está errado, é pênalti. Multa compensatória. Né? Portanto, a plataforma recebe tudo, a academia não recebe. Por quê? Porque esse voucher eu não usei. Né? Aí tem uma questão também de consumerista. Pode isso? Eu posso perder todo o meu voucher por não ter utilizado, ou eu vou ter algum tipo de problema relacionado a isso? Enfim, acho que era mais para despertar a curiosidade de todos num tema que eu acho que é justamente isso. A matéria tributária hoje deixou de ser uma matéria simples. Ela passou a ser uma matéria extremamente complexa e sofisticada. Por isso que os desafios para nós são muito maiores. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Quiroga. Eu passo a palavra, então, ao professor Vikram Chand, que vai falar da sua experiência também.
Okay, thank you. So you had mentioned I have to speak about the Swiss experience, right? No, actually I'm going to talk about the Indian experience because that's more interesting because nothing's really happening in Switzerland on the digital economy side. But that's not only in Switzerland, but in a lot of other countries which are a bit small in size compared to the big economies. With respect to taxing the sharing economy, I'm just going to give you what's really happening in India right now. And can I just have the slide changer, please? Sorry. Thank you. So, just to give you a policy background, so what had happened? So in 2015, the OECD came out with this report on BEPS Action 1. And in the BEPS Action 1 report, the OECD proposed several options which states could actually adopt in the national legislation with respect to taxing digitalized businesses. Among various options the OECD had proposed, one of the options was the equalization levy. So in 2015, when OECD proposed that states could adopt an equalization levy, although it did not recommend such an option, India just went ahead and it introduced the equalization levy with respect to some selected highly digitalized businesses. So basically, for example, if you have a non-resident service provider which is in the business of advertising, and that advertiser provides services to clients in India, India would levy an equalization levy on a gross basis. So for example, if the non-resident service provider provides a service of more than, let's say, $2,000, I think that's the limit that has been set, more than $2,000, and it receives a service fee, so India is going to withhold taxes on that at 6%. And that's the equalization levy which India introduced. So, and this equalization levy was only on advertising services. So it's nothing to do with the sharing economy that we've been speaking about since morning, like Uber or Airbnb. It was just targeted at advertising services, like platforms such as Facebook or Google, which are online advertisers. So after India introduced the equalization levy, Italy followed. And in 2018, there was a discussion in the Italian budget about 2017-18 budget of introducing an equalization levy in Italy, and they actually introduced that with a 3% levy. So India set the cap at 6%, then Italy set the cap at 3%. Then you had the European Commission, which came out, and it also introduced, came out with a proposal about introducing an equalization levy kind of tax, like the digital services tax. And once again, that was restricted to only some selected highly digitalized businesses, such as online advertisers, and the European Commission expanded that to even platforms such as Uber, Airbnb, so on and so forth. So that's the policy background, but there are a lot of issues from an Indian perspective with respect to the introduction of such a tax. So from an Indian perspective, there is clearly an issue of whether this tax falls within the scope of tax treaties. A lot of academics in India, as well as practitioners, they have argued that this kind of tax is a treaty override, a tax treaty override, and hence should not apply. Now, the biggest discussion there is this levy, does it fall under the scope of Article 2 of the OECD model? Like, for example, if you look at tax treaties, all tax treaties have an article which deals with taxes covered. And the key question there is whether the equalization levy is a tax that is covered by a tax treaty. Now, if it is a tax that is covered by a tax treaty, then principally it should not apply because there's no permanent establishment that the non-resident service provider would have in India. So that's one of the biggest issues there, is with respect to whether this tax falls under the scope of tax treaties or not. The second issue is the double taxation. So India, if it introduces this tax, let's say on 6% on a gross basis, the key question there is, should the resident state provide for relief for the tax levied in India? Now, if it is classified as a levy and if it's outside the scope of tax treaties, probably the state of residence would not provide a credit for the taxes. At most, the state of residence may provide a deduction from its taxable base with respect to this tax as a taxable deduction as an expense. One of the issues also in India which was discussed was whether this levy conflicts with certain GATS principles, the General Agreement on Trade and Services. And there the Indian position was that no, it does not conflict because there's an exception to the GATS agreement with respect to services, but that again is disputable. Okay. One more issue, again from an Indian perspective, with respect to this equalization kind of levy is, does it conflict with some constitutional principles in India? Because in the Indian constitution also you have, let's say, the principle of equality, as well as some parts of the constitution there's also the principle of neutrality. So like in other countries, like in Switzerland, you have the principle of neutrality in the constitution. Probably I'm not a German tax expert, but I've read an article by a professor from Germany, and he said there could also be some conflicts with the neutrality principle in Germany. So that's also an issue in India with respect to these taxes. Now, even though I'm highlighting all the issues here with respect to this equalization levy which was introduced in India, there has been no one has actually taken this case to the courts as yet on challenging the equalization levy on various grounds, like conflicts with tax treaties or conflicts with the constitutional principles. But what I know is that there is a group of lawyers in India who may challenge this before the Indian courts, and probably if they win, all the revenue that has been collected by the government from the non-resident taxpayers will have to be refunded. But you never know what's going to happen. So this is the status of the equalization levy in India, which was introduced in 2016. Now, India has gone broader than the equalization levy because, like I told you, in 2015, the OECD came out with its BEPS Action 1 report. One other policy option that the OECD had suggested was to introduce a significant economic presence test, and it was not really clear from the BEPS Action 1 report whether it was targeted only at digitalized businesses or whether it was targeted at all businesses in general. So in order to ensure that the digitalized economy is not ring-fenced, what India did is that, India being the source of the market state, it introduced the concept of significant economic presence in its domestic law. So under the domestic law of India, there's already a concept known as business connection, which basically states that if a non-resident business has a business connection in India, then that non-resident would be subject to taxes in India on a net basis, based on the income that is attributable to this business connection. So this concept of business connection has been expanded to include the concept of significant economic presence. So the significant economic presence has two limbs to it. One is at the level of the nexus, and the second is at the level of profit attribution. Now, with respect to the limb at the nexus level, the Indian government has indicated that a non-resident enterprise would be considered to have a significant economic presence in India if it either passes two thresholds. One is a revenue-based threshold, and one is a user-based threshold. So, for example, you can just take any company like Lindt, which is in the business of selling chocolates. If Lindt sells chocolates in India and it exceeds a certain revenue threshold from selling chocolates in India, it would be deemed to have a significant economic presence in India, for example. Similarly, if you take a company like Airbnb, Uber, or Facebook, and if these kind of companies, they have certain users in India, and they like a large number of users in India, and the users exceed the user-based threshold, which is going to be set by the government, then a significant economic presence is deemed to exist in India. Now, these nexus rules are under discussion in India right now. There's no position of the government which the government has officially taken. The government right now has invited the public to give some comments on how these thresholds should be framed, and the public consultation process would probably get over at the end of this month, or probably it may get extended because it's a very hot issue right now in India. So that's at the level of nexus. So the revenue threshold and a user-based threshold has been provided, but the exact numbers or the quantification of these thresholds has not yet taken place. Now, even if the government succeeds in framing a nexus based on a revenue or a user-based threshold, there's also this big issue of profit allocation. I think this is the biggest issue in international tax law right now, not only from an Indian perspective, but from an international tax law perspective, is how would you allocate profits to such a significant economic presence, whether it's in the form of a digital P or a significant economic presence for all enterprises. How would you allocate profits? Now, in the morning, we had Sergio, and he gave a very nice presentation, and he said that the current profit allocation rules, they only take into consideration supply-side factors. So they really look into the functions, assets, risk of enterprises. If functions, assets, risk is everything is in the state of residence, nothing would be allocated to the significant economic presence. So you need to change something. So probably the Indians, this is what I've heard, again it's unofficial, is that they may move from a concept known as a FAR concept, which is what we have under the current transfer pricing guidelines, functions, assets, risk. They move to a concept known as the farm analysis, where in order to allocate profits to the market, you would need to take into consideration not only functions, assets, risk, but also the market. And this is what Sergio also had mentioned in the morning in his presentation. But the key question there is, how do you value the market? So based on our informal discussions with the Indian government, there are two ideas basically. One idea is that it's wholly arbitrary, no logic to it, is that you allocate 25% each to functions, assets, risk, and market. So for example, functions, assets, risk gets 75%, and the market gets 25%, completely ad hoc, no economic base for this, but it's just a solution to a very complicated issue, a very simple solution. No economic logic to this, okay? That's one way to do it. It's a very simple way. The second way, which is also being considered, is that you take the taxable base in relation to the market, and you allocate the entire taxable base to the significant economic presence. So for example, if you have a company like Facebook, which is providing advertising services in India, and if Facebook derives revenue from India, the revenue would be the revenue of the P would be the revenue from India as reduced by expenses, and the expenses will be calculated on the basis of the activities related to the revenue that has been derived from India, which is linked to the revenue coming from India. But again, this is quite complicated, and we will still have to look for what direction the government is going to take, which direction the government is actually going to. And I think the OECD is really looking into also what India is doing quite intensively, I would say. Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Nós chegamos na metade dos nossos depoimentos locais e o que a gente percebe é que, vendo também o primeiro painel, é que o que nós discutimos de maneira geral, nós encontramos também as discussões de maneira particular. Isso está bastante interessante. Eu passo então a palavra para Bristar Kao, que vai trazer a experiência da China.
Thanks, Edison. Thanks, Louis, for inviting me to this great event. For you to remember me well, I will explain about my name. Bristar actually means bright star. It's a combined word 30 years ago. I have this word for my name. I don't know that it's in coincidence with the BRI initiative, that is Belt and Road Initiative, 30 years later. And I will use that BRI for conclusion of my speech or explanation. I will speak about 3 points. The first, the nature of the issue, and second, China's position today, and the third, what is the possible solution for the future. We are talking about the sharing economy and also the digital economy. What is the problem? Is it the problem of the state of the country? It's not for the civilians, for the ordinary people. For the ordinary people, we are living a better life now. We have having a we're eating better. We are working faster. We can use the Uber. We can also use the mobike, and we can use the Alipay. We can use the Google Pay, etc. So it's more fairer and more efficient life. So it means better life. Then, but it's a very major problem for the country and for the state, for the fiscal matters. And we know that for the modernized era, a lot of countries will live on debt, because tax itself is not enough. For every civilian, for every enterprise, the tax burden should be mitigated, should be the smallest. So theoretically speaking, tax country will become a failure. And then what becomes the fiscal or the budgetary for the states, for the country? Some countries are becoming are living on debt very to the large part. And luckily for China, we don't have to live on that for the past at least 40 years, because I will talk about China's position. China is not in a hurry and not necessary to hush in having a new rule for the share economy and the digital economy, the tax system. We are precautious in promoting the living standards of the ordinary people, not just for the revenues objective. China has a large number of state-owned assets. That's the very important element that China can survive from the 2008 financial crisis. And even it's very vital for the future sustainable developing. So China is in a hurry for this new legislation in sharing economy or digital economy. Then what will be the Chinese consideration for the next stage for the coming future? I think, and also our colleagues have sharing the same opinion, that maybe we can use another word you are very familiar with, that is BEPS, but it's BEPS 2, it's not BEPS 1. BEPS 1 means base erosion and profit shifting, but with BEPS 2, we means the base expansion and the profit sharing. How can the base be expanded or extended? Because we just prolong the railroad, the cable line, the business cycle, the business line, and the economy, the employment will become better. We will have more employment and more growth of the economy. So the sharing platform or digital platform, it means the growing of the community in terms of the scale. So the community is growing larger, so people are enjoying larger scale life, but it will become a problem for the budget, for the revenue purpose. So how can we solve that? We use the BEPS tool. With this, the blurred line between market, factory, between resident and source, between producer and consumer, between direct and indirect taxes will be considered in depth. How can we solve that problem? Maybe we will use some techniques, for example, the balancing or equalizing tax, just as Vikram said. In the English and American law, we have the equity law, but maybe in the future, in the tax, we can have the balance tax or the equalization tax, so that when we're using the technique of inversion or reversion, we can have a more balanced, moderate rationality for these international tax rules. So, all in all, this sharing economy and the digital economy will be very related with the value creation. And what does that mean? I will elaborate this afternoon when we talk about the blockchain and also the consumption taxation. Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Eu passo a palavra, então, para o professor Vitor Machekin, espero ter acertado o nome, que vai falar sobre a experiência na Rússia.
Well, hello. First of all, let me thank the organizers of the conference for inviting me to share this conference and panel discussions in this wonderful university, and I hope that this sharing will not trigger dramatic tax consequences for all of us. I don't have slides, and I will try to speak simple. We Russians will like simplicity, and I'd like to start with questions for the audience. Is there anybody in the audience who visited Russia this year for the World Cup? Or not? Probably no. Well, it's not very good statistics. I think that your soccer team will not be happy to see that tax specialists, they are ignoring, support of your team. But maybe somebody visited Russia but still stay there. My further question would like to be, did you use Uber in Russia or not? Maybe somebody tried to use it and still in Russia trying to pay for the services. In Russia we have sharing economy, we have Uber, we have other obvious players we are discussing today, and in short we have the same problems from tax perspective, and not just from tax perspective. First of all, our tax law is not designed to cover sharing economy, but at the same time somehow we survive, and business in share economy is booming. And the question, how we can combine these problems and real life? It's a big question, and I would like to give something about Russian experience. We are not, a country who are making new conceptual rules in international taxation. Sometimes we create something, but mostly we are copying solutions from other countries' experience. It's not a secret. In sharing economy, we have some domestic solutions, not that designed for sharing economy, but global solutions which help people to develop sharing economy. For example, private entrepreneurs, drivers, they can rely on so-called simplified system of taxation. It's very simple, just tax registration and one tax. Our ordinary personal income tax is 13%, 1-3, not progressive. But for entrepreneurs, we have reduced rates. So it is very friendly. It helps to solve many problems. Not all problems. I think that the biggest problem in sharing is in B2B business, because conceptually, sharing is something new for economy. In old Soviet time, everything was owned by state, and sharing did not raise any legal problems. State just directed what to share and where and how. And we did not need any special law on this. Currently, when business are trying to share something, it's a problem. There is a project I'm involved in this project for many years. Like 20 years ago, two oil companies tried to share something. Well, they're neighbors. They are producing oils. One company has refinery and production facility, another one pipeline. They still don't have the solution for their business. They're still discussing how to share. Not just, they're looking for a solution, not just because they have just tax problems. There are legal problems as well. But they're discussing these 20 years. I'm back to the question, how economy survives in these circumstances. Actually, the tax authorities are not very active in raising all these issues in respect of sharing economy. Why? There are different reasons. First of all, Russian budget is not in a very bad condition. It is balancing, positive, negative. At the moment, it is positive. So tax authorities are not, let's say, crazy. And finance ministry and tax authorities, they are not pressing taxpayers for any ruble or any dollar. And in our big country, it is much easier to increase rate for big companies like Gazprom a little bit and to solve many problems. This does not mean that tax authorities are absolutely neutral and don't have any interest to tax sharing economy. Federals are not very active, but locals, they are thinking about taxation. For example, city of Moscow is thinking about an introduction on law on taxing sharing of assets in Moscow. While locals are thinking about this, because locals are organizing many asset share companies, like sharing cars, for example. At the same time, locals are very interesting to filling their budgets. And for them, it will be additional revenue, and Moscow authorities are very ambitious. They build a lot of things. They need additional money. So, it's not clear what Moscow authorities are trying to introduce. There are just rumors about this confidential draft of law. But it looks like their logic is very simple, that if there are any benefits in using, in sharing assets, beneficiary should be taxed. Beneficiary in this sense are individuals. It's very simple logic, but I doubt that it will fly in Russia, because, we have many benefits, and participating at this Congress also a benefit. To have income calls to your mobile, it's also a benefit. To open account at Google, all these things are benefits, but we know that in real life, authorities are not taxing this. So I think that this is just an example that, locals are thinking about something which is pretty new for them, because they are not in they don't have long story of taxation and understanding of tax law. So probably this idea will fail. But, let's see, maybe there will be something else. Generally, I would like to well, to move to another very simple point. You see, today we understand each other very good. All these issues related to sharing economy are pretty standard. And there is no revolution in a tax life. Basically, well, in Switzerland there is nothing new, as we know, in respect of taxing of sharing economy. Either in other countries, basically it is possible to use ordinary tax rules for taxing sharing economy, and currently it's very popular about to discuss these things as hot issues. But I doubt that these things are really hot. I looked at Arif, and he mentioned today the discussion about taxation of servers many years ago, like 15 years ago. Tax specialists were, well, very enthusiastic about, well, almost the same topics, looking at the internet development in respect of international taxation. And, well, you see there were many conferences, publications, but, well, now in 15 years' time we see that rules are the same and the problems are not so dramatic as we discussed. And I think that sharing economy, of course, have some new features, but basically, well, it is just illustration of routine issues. We have legislation, we have business. In my country, taxation definitely is not a red flag. There are other legal issues like data protection. Well, it is more serious things. Government is pressing foreign companies to come to Russia, to set up Russian subsidiaries and to have their data on servers in Russia. It really stick. Taxation, I told you about personal income rate. Our profits tax is 20%, also not great. Tax penalties are also not very high. So at the moment, business somehow are accepting these risks because, well, it is just environment in the country. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Muito obrigado. Eu passo a palavra agora para o nosso último expositor, que é o Daniel Gutmann, que vai falar da experiência francesa.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me once again here. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you very much. Yes, lunch is just after me, so that's the good news. So now that you're in a good mood, I can speak for an hour. Yes, I'm supposed to speak from a French perspective, but actually the title says also from an EU perspective, so I don't really know which perspective I'm supposed to talk from. And the fact that I don't know is interesting as such, because in the EU, we don't really have general rules that apply to taxation of individuals, and all the questions that we have, well, part of the questions that we have addressed so far regard individuals. How should they be taxed if they perform activities that can be related to the sharing economy? We have more initiatives in the field of corporate income tax, and I'll come back to that in a second. No, in half an hour, sorry. Starting with individuals, let me tell you how in France we see things. In France, we don't really have a word and or expression for the sharing economy. Actually, we don't, you know, the right translation would be économie du partage. Partage is to share, right? But we don't have that. We're talking about collaborative economy, which is something quite different. Although the two expressions are quite similar in to some extent, what I mean here is when we talk about the sharing economy, we talk about very different things. And I'm not sure the actual system of income tax can accommodate all those realities through the same tools. Let me give you a few examples, which are examples for which there are publications from the tax administration, guidelines published on the website of the tax authorities, even small summaries provided by the French government on the website of the Ministry of Finance. So first example, assume I'm a lady and I just gave birth to a child, but I cannot afford to buy a stroller to take my kid around. So what will I do? I can't buy it. So I'll go on a platform, and fortunately there will be someone out there saying, well, I can rent it out to you because I have an old stroller. I had a kid 10 years ago and I don't need it anymore. Now that's something which belongs to the shared economy. You might wonder why that person would rent out a stroller rather than simply lend the stroller. But in our society, there are no small gains anymore, especially in individualistic society where people seem to have financial problems, even of that kind. Anyway, what is this? What's the nature of the income? Well, it's ordinary income, and there's no doubt this is just income because you are performing an activity which is to rent out an asset, which in my example is a stroller. So nothing new under the sun. And there's no reason why this kind of reasoning cannot be extended to renting out any kind of other assets such as a car, giving guitar lessons, math lessons. These are examples which can be found on the website of the French Ministry of Finance. Now the question becomes a little bit more difficult if we are entering the economy of barter, and that has been addressed by Yariv earlier this morning. If on a platform I say, hey, I'm ready to give tax advice, I don't really want money in exchange, but if you can fix my electricity network at my home, that will be fine. Yeah, that's more complicated because that's the kind of exchange of services that can be done through the use of platforms. And here you have a very classical income tax question, which is this income, or does barter escape the scope of income tax generally? And that's a tricky issue, but it's not new. It's a very old question, actually. And people in the rural areas of France have done that for centuries. And there are very old cases of barter in the 19th century, So that's nothing new. It's just that it can become more visible with the sharing economy. So what could be new, what's really important, what's growing as a social phenomenon, it's the fact to share costs. I have a car, and we're several people. We need to go working together. Instead of having each of us our own car, we're going to share the costs. We're going to share the fuel to do the same trip. So that's something which can be eased by the use of platforms. And we have actually an administrative guideline in France, which is quite interesting because it tells you that if you share costs, the revenue, the income that you make by sharing costs is not subject to income tax. It's a very ambiguous administrative guideline, to say the least, because what it actually tells you, the guideline is in section 1 of the first chapter of income tax, and it just follows the definition of income. So the tax authorities define what income is, and then they tell you it is admitted, which in French means by derogation to ordinary principles, the tax authorities are ready to admit that sharing of cost sharing is not income. But you don't really know whether this is the application of ordinary income tax principles, which seem to be the case to me, because if you don't get richer because you share costs anyway. But by exception anyway, we won't tax that. And there are plenty of examples. They even talk about co-cooking, doing a lot of stuff. For those of you who are interested and read French, I have the guidelines here, and I can show them to you later on. My point here is to say, well, characterization of income relating to the shared economy does not raise that many new questions, although there has been a need for clarification, which has been very, very pressful, and whether there's been a lot of pressure to have clarification. Of course, some political people wanted to go further than that, and they wanted to say, look, we should simply exempt income from sharing economy. And we even have draft bills in order to exempt income from shared economy, but the Parliament did not endorse this view, because why would you exempt this kind of income and not the income perceived by other economic actors? I mean, if this bill was passed, I would go out in the street and say, why don't you exempt income from, you know, fees perceived by lawyers, in the name of equality, of course. And well, the law has not been passed, but the reason but it's interesting to see that some people have tried to solve the problem of income tax enforcement through an exemption rule. The real problem here, of course, is not the need to exempt. The real problem is how to enforce a rule which states that any person who rents out a stroller is supposed to pay income tax on that. And maybe if that person does it on an independent basis, in a professional way, even VAT. So that's the issue. But it's easy to solve the issue if you have thresholds that take into account that some minor activities can escape income tax through a threshold. It's interesting to see, though, that France has taken the position that the best way to make those people pay income tax is to use platform, and this time companies operating the platforms, as a source of information for the French Treasury. Soon enough, platforms have been obliged to tell their users, you should pay income tax on the income that you make. And a few years after, the tax authorities convinced Parliament to adopt a rule saying that French authorities can ask platforms information on their users. And now, since 2016, platforms are even obliged to declare, without being asked by the tax authorities, the income made by their users to the tax administration. So there's been a progressive evolution, and now platforms are heavily involved in collaboration with tax authorities to have tax enforced. Now, talking about platform taxation, a lot has been said before my talk, and there is no specific French approach to that. The only thing that I would like to add in the 24 seconds that I have left is just to tell you how important the two draft directives which exist at the European Union level are at this moment. Vikram already said a word on the draft directive on the digital services tax, which indeed looks like a digitalization service tax. There is also another draft directive on the concept of significant digital presence, which basically introduces a kind of virtual PE system in Europe on the basis of the idea that when certain thresholds pertaining to the number of users, the general turnover derived by the operating company, etc., has been made. So these two directives are still not in force. Who knows whether they will be? The digital service tax is presented by the European Commission as an interim measure waiting for further consensus. My question is whether this interim measure will not become a final measure, in which case, of course, that would change the physiognomy of international taxation. But that's all for now. Thank you for your attention.
Muito obrigado. Como o Daniel comentou, eu também já vi os mais novos fazendo referência à economia colaborativa, né? Não seria economia compartilhada, isso tem diferença. E isso vai impactar também, nós já estamos vendo em outros setores, como aconteceu na União Europeia e agora aqui no Brasil, onde nós nos baseamos na norma europeia, que é a questão da proteção de dados, que tem uma influência aí também, com certeza. E, recentemente, dois autores, o Howard Buffett e William Aymick, lançaram um livro chamado Social Value Investing, que é quase que uma economia colaborativa do lado financeiro, do lado das finanças públicas. Bastante interessante também como isso tem mudado o nosso estudo e, obviamente, vai mexer com a academia. Bom, eu quero então dar a grande notícia de que agora é o almoço e nós voltamos então à tarde para os próximos painéis. Muito obrigado.